Now, and we are live. Welcome to today's discussion. I'm Justin Minot. I'm joined here by some beautiful humans, some who I'm meeting for the first time today and some whom I've known way too long already. No, but I love them. And so today's discussion, really the heart of it is discovering what is ours to do in this moment. And that really, as Dave, my business partner, I'm going to be introducing him in a minute, the question, what's mine to do, just really leaning into the personalness of what that means, right? So embodying what is mine to do, understanding that each person has a different role, different privileges, different opportunities, different ways that they can speak to this discussion and speak to this current moment and the past moments and the future moments as well. So I'm not going to say too much more on that. Before we introduce our incredible panelists, I want to introduce the team here at the Enlightrepreneurs, our wonderful little team of world changers here. We're going to start with Dave, and then we'll go over to Haley. So Dave, why don't you introduce yourself and then just talk about the origin of this event and the origin of this moment here and how we got to this place.
Sure. So I'm Dave Gold. I'm I'm the co-founder of the Enlightrepreneurs, along with Justin to my left here, at least on the screen. And I want to do an origin story or creation myth because I wanted you to know how we got here. And the reason is it's a bit of wisdom that one of my former spiritual teachers said: the path and the goal are one and the same, which means how you create determines what you create. So how we got to this creative moment is really a function of what we want to create, or at least what I feel I want to see created through this gathering. And basically, Justin and I are both entrepreneurs, higher-minded entrepreneurs. We met, late last year, quickly decided we want to do podcasts. And then like a week after we decided to do podcasts, I think we had 6 in a can. Yeah. And we were bringing on purpose-driven entrepreneurs. And the reason we wanted to work with this group is we're both change agents, as everybody I'm sure on this call is. And we found that entrepreneurs, and Farad and I we were talking with Farad before, we change. I mean, that's what we do. We're here to change things through business, and we pivot quickly. We work with higher purpose people because we are, but also when you hear that higher calling or you're driven by something more deeply inside, that gives us the courage and the intuition, and I believe even the assistance to create big change. And also we work in a community. We have a community of people because we bring those kind of people together and work together, anything's possible. So one of our community members, I was on the phone with him, and Danny Rosen, who is a close friend and friend of Farad's as well. And we thank him for putting us in touch with Farad and getting him as one of our panelists here today. But I just said, "How you doing?" He said, "I'm a mess." And it was so raw. And it was because he's a businessman. He's a community activist. He's on the board of a nonprofit. He's a father. He's a husband. And like, what the heck do I do in this moment? Do I bring my kids? And it was really heartfelt. And I brought it up in our next morning meeting, and we decided we were going to do something like this. And so first we brought it into our group, and now we're bringing this out. And basically this is an outgrowth of certainly a hell of a lot of diversity in our own company, but really the fact that we want to change. We want to change through leadership. We want to change by listening. And I think that's the whole thing is I don't have answers. I have a question, which is what's mine to do. And that's the question that I would encourage everyone to do, and also feel the power that we have individually and collectively to actually bring the energy and the purity of purpose that's going into this moment into whatever it is that we create in this moment and beyond. And with that, I'll turn it over to Haley, newest member of our company and a great friend and human being.
Hi, everybody. My name is Haley Brengartner, and I'm serving as the Director of Expansion at the Enlightrepreneurs. And I'm going to speak a little bit today about the format of the next hour. So for the non-Black community and for everybody as allies, it's our job and our duty right now to sit and to listen. So this panel is going to mirror exactly what we should be doing in society. So for the time being, until the half-hour mark, I encourage everybody to sit and listen. And at the half-hour mark, then we'll start taking questions. So through the Facebook live chat, just feel free to put questions in there starting around 12:30.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So today's panel, just a heavy hitter bunch of powerful humans doing incredible work. We have Aisha Allen, a doctor, a CEO of several companies, a military captain, great friend of mine. Anyway, and so yeah, you'll get to hear from her. Farad Ali, the former CEO of the Institute, current board chair of the Triangle Community Foundation. And I want to make sure I get this right, so I'm pulling up my notes. We have Melanie Bullock, the director for the Center for Leadership at Elon University. We are going to start by storytelling. Story is one of the most powerful forms of expression, and it's one of the most powerful ways we can communicate a message, because people can disagree with our policies, they can disagree with our beliefs, they can disagree with a lot of different things, but no one can take our story away from us, our experience away from us. So I just want to start with the experience of these incredible panelists, your journey to where you are today. So talk about what you're doing and just give us a bit of context and background for how you got to this point and some of what you have gone through in order to get here. So I'd like to start with Aisha. We can unmute. Oh, oops, I just muted her by accident. You have to unmute yourself again. There you go.
She's still muting people.
I have a lot of power right now and it feels good. So be careful, I'm watching you.
All right, I'll start with my mother. How about that?
That's a good start.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman, gave birth to me, obviously. And everything that I am now and everything that I've ever will do is because I probably saw her do it, or she in some way told me that's what I needed to do. And I was the child that listened when she said, just do what I say. I have 3 brothers who did not just do what she said. So as you can imagine, I was somewhat of the angel child. Some would not agree now, but that's okay. So I lived in Stafford, Virginia, grew up there, upper middle class. I was the token in all areas, all forever. Played soccer. I figure skated, skied, because my mom wanted to put me in places that were different than the norm. She's from Aruba, my dad's from Jamaica. She grew up in Holland. And so my upbringing was very, very different. I had a very different lens than most. And I grew up seeing my mom always fighting, is what I would say. Like, I was like, Mom, you're so angry all the time. Like, why did you yell at that woman? What did she do? Thinking back now, they told her that her 3 kids were too loud, or that her family shouldn't be sitting in the front of the restaurant, or trying to sit her in the back near the bathroom. And she was always dealing with so much toward her. I would always ask, like, why did you change how you talked when you answered the phone, Mom? Like, you don't sound like that. Where'd your Caribbean accent go? And so now I'm remembering all of these things and just seeing how strong she was all of the time for all 3 of her kids. And I have taken every single lesson that I've seen or learned from her through my experiences with, education, being sat outside the classroom when I got hundreds on my tests from age 5, and seeing my mom roll up being like, hey, what's good? She is smart. She didn't cheat on her test. All the way to middle school, that happening, and all the way now into grad school. I just finished at Duke University, where I had some of the most crazy experiences around race and discrimination possible, that I am actually very, very vocal about right now on my Instagram, if you wanted to look, but profiled through a just disgusting letter. And my school took it as truth, regardless of my businesses and my mentoring and everything that I do for the community. My school looked at me as guilty. And that was kind of like the final straw among all the other things that I've done as far around race and healthcare, to where, this situation with George Floyd allowed me to really just unveil everything that I have been through, and shed the light on the work that I have been doing around race and discrimination, from my doctorate work around implicit bias in healthcare that I did through Duke, and then increasing the amount of minorities in healthcare through my organization called the Ohano and Allen Foundation, where I give scholarships to minorities. So I am really just diving into all of that work that I have been doing and just being very, very, very vocal about it.
Wow. Thanks for being on here, and thanks for sharing your story. Melanie, what's your story?
Sounds good. So I'm happy to be here and have this discussion. My story, I'll also start with just acknowledgement of my parents who are educators. And so I feel like my path has definitely been crafted and curated by watching them and their leadership and the variety of things that they've done. My dad works in higher education, has worked in higher education, and my mom is a elementary school educator. And so just seeing their passion for people and compassion to educate others has always been a part of my life and my story and in my journey, and an inspiration for me. They also love to challenge the norm. And so I grew up part of my life in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and then the other part in Raleigh, North Carolina. Harrisonburg, just not a diverse community there, but it was unique to see how my parents just showed up and showed out in a variety of different ways to make their presence known and to speak up and do things that supported specifically the Black community. I went to Spelman College for my undergraduate experience. I think my journey really launched at Spelman as a first-year student. In the English class, my English professor took us out to campaign for the first Black woman mayor of Atlanta. Like, that was our course. And as a student, and my parents ingraining the power of education in us as kids, like I knew I needed to show up in the classroom and do what I needed to do. And so I was down for the cause, like whatever I needed to do. So we were on the corners campaigning for Shirley Franklin from my English class. And I didn't realize in that experience what that was teaching me and what that was prepping me for throughout my experience in undergrad, but also for other things. And so from that particular class, I got really engaged in civic engagement and looking at ways to embark upon this thing called activism when I didn't even know what it was. And so later on in my college career, I joined student government and all these other organizations, and we had a chance to organize or learn the methods of organization as a group or as a community. For example, when there were a lot of things in the media that weren't highlighting Black women in the most positive light, we band together and we organized and strategized to try to create a voice and create awareness around those issues that we were seeing in the media, specifically in music. And so that carried with me in grad school. I went to James Madison University for my graduate program in higher education administration. I knew once I left Spelman, everything I learned there and all the things that I gained throughout my journey leading up to my time at Spelman was being able to give the type of experience I had and educate other young adults in the way that I received the education and the power and the tools and the resources to create some type of change. And so in grad school, did a program specifically on learning the methods of working at a college campus and to really work with that community of college students. While I was there, I had a chance to really gather a group. At the time, Katrina had hit and we wanted to do something. We also noticed that in the media, there was a narrative that was being told that we felt like was a little off. And so we wanted to organize students and grad students, and we got groups together, not only at James Madison, but throughout the country to do a spring break trip where we went. And it was called Katrina on the Ground, where we went to help with some of the hurricane relief, but also we wanted to gather the narrative and the stories of the residents there to be able to take those back and share with others about some of the systematic issues that were happening prior to Katrina that contributed to Katrina and things in the community that were, community members were really suffering at that time with all the things that were happening. And so our group went to do the service, but we also got the narrative and had a chance to talk with the residents here to see what else we could do beyond our time once we left that time being in New Orleans, like what we could do when we got back to our communities to raise voices and raise awareness for for others. And so my entire journey and like with my career as a higher education administrator was to equip students the way I was equipped, to be able to ask big questions, to dig a little deeper, to get the narratives, to create change. And whether that's to hold your university accountable for different things, or if that is to, in your community, that passion and desire to give to your community, to organize and equip yourselves to do and create real change. And so currently I'm excited because my work at Elon University, I'm working in leadership. I serve as the director of the Center for Leadership. And so a lot of my programs and initiatives are about equipping students to create change. One of my favorite things to do is this class we do called Disarming Injustice, Nonviolence, and the Civil Rights Movement. And so we study the Civil Rights Movement and where leadership existed in that. And then we take our students on it's called the Civil Rights Leadership Tour, where we start in Greensboro, North Carolina. We go to Birmingham, Selma, and Montgomery, Alabama. And then we also go to Atlanta, Georgia. And those students are like researching and taking a deep dive into the narratives of leaders and leadership that existed in movements like the Civil Rights Movement and others. And they're also talking to community members, mayors in different cities, and different community members, activists in those cities, to really understand the value of change in ways, and start to get ideas of ways in which they can come back to their own communities and organize and do the same things that they are hearing about. And so I'm excited because even beyond that course, like I'm trying to gather students, particularly like right now, to help identify ways that they can do something. And so there are a lot of students that are just like, I want to do something, but I just don't know where to start. And so we are looking at ways to just equip them and like strategize, help them organize as groups so that they can figure out ways that they can speak up and speak out in a variety of different ways. So for example, we had a group of students that I'm working with that we put together protester kits where we're equipping protesters with education on knowing your rights and safety guidelines. So when you're out on the front lines, here are some things just to know. Also, our students that are going out to protest, we wanted them to be prepared for that experience. Giving them, providing like water and like snacks and different first aid kit types of things, all trying to organize students to put those things together, have some conversations about ways that they can give back, and create some real change in the midst that's with everything that's going on right now. And so my journey, I'm hoping to continue that, that so that we can further the conversation, so we can take deep dives and the layers that exist with creating change, with things that are happening, things that have been happening for the past 400 years. Like we just want to pull those layers back, and we want to make sure that students understand the layers that exist so that they can identify what they need to do to create change.
Yeah, the work is deep. Wow, I'm so glad to have you on here. Thanks, Melanie. Really appreciate. Now, for those who are just joining us on Facebook Live, we had some technical difficulties starting the event on Facebook. It didn't transfer all the way over, so just wanted to give a bit more context for the format of today's discussion. We have Aisha, Alan, Farad, Ali, and Melanie. I'm going to make sure I get your last name properly. Bullock, yes? Yeah. All right, Bullock Harris, I see two, so that's good. Okay, got you now. Three incredible community leaders here, and the event is a practice in listening. It's a practice in listening first, acting second. And I'm a firm believer that in order to take a stand, you have to first take a seat. And that's it. There are a lot of allies on here. There are a lot of people who want to make a difference with the Black community, a lot of the Black community members watching this as well. And the journey starts with understanding. So we started with storytelling and hearing Aisha's story, and then Melanie's story, and you're about to hear Farad's story. But I just wanted to give a little bit more context for those who are just joining us. And if you do have any questions, we're going to start taking questions in about 20 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. Please put them in the Facebook Live chat, and we will start answering those questions that way from there. So now turning it over to Farad. What's your story? Glad to have you here.
Yeah. I first want to thank Justin, Dave, and Haley for having us. Haley for having me here in this group together, and also Danny Rosen for being a part of it. But I tell you, I'm sitting here teary-eyed because I'm watching this Black Girl Magic with Melanie and Aisha, and it's really exciting. I've got a daughter who's 27 years old, and she's a physician at working in Morehouse in Atlanta at Grady, and it's so impressive to see you all doing this great work. So it's I too have to thank my parents for investing in me. My mom comes from the deep South of South Carolina, where there's one stoplight, 13 children. All of them worked on a cotton farm. My grandmother was a domestic worker. My grandfather was a farmer with pigs, and I've watched them suffer and go through their stories and tell me what it was like in the deep South. I took a trip to South Carolina every summer. My father was in New York, working in, he went to the military, Vietnam, that process, and he was a hustler. So you got a chance to see, I got a hustler as a father, a country girl as a mother. They found a way, they hooked up and got married, and then became me. And as that product, I got a chance to see my family from two different places. I got a chance to see a hustling family, kind of much like what you've seen in the Malcolm X story. I won't share all of that, but I got a chance to see things as a young kid that probably a lot of young children don't see. So I'm very familiar with the penal system, very, very familiar with the mafia and drugs and all the things that happen in New York City. I'm also very familiar with going down to South Carolina and watching the racism that occurred to my family over again. And I remember my glasses broke, and they were like, you can't get your glasses fixed for like 2 months until you go back to New York, because there was nobody to see me in that South. And so I saw both sides of this country. Fortunately enough, my dad worked for a company called IBM, and he had transferred to a small region called RTP. And when he did that, I went from a very diverse New York, which had, Latinos and Jewish people and Black people and, Asians and Jamaican and Haitians. I got a chance to see that rich diversity growing up and being in the public school system. And then I come to North Carolina, and it was just black and white. And the reality of my summers became my life. And it was an interesting part of it, because you learn how to cope, because you figure out, I've got to figure out a way to make it in this world, because my parents were high school educated, and the opportunities for me were going to be determined by my ability to move forward. And that whole process of getting indoctrinated into, when we first moved here, we moved to the northeast side of Durham, which was, I went to Club Boulevard School, and it was rich in the African American history, but they also weren't really engaging with the white history of Durham. And then we moved to the outskirts of Hope Valley, which is a more affluent community in Durham. And I lived on the edge of it, so I ended up going to the Durham public schools on the county side, and got a chance to see, the white Durham, if I may say, and integrating both of those through my childhood. I was fortunate enough to be able to play basketball, and got a chance to play, left Jordan, played the freshman team at Carolina, and realized, based on what my GPA was going to be, I was never going to be a businessman, and I always wanted to be in business. And so you go from basketball to class to try to fix that point grade average that you had. I had my threes were after the point in my freshman year. I had to invert those. So ended up going through school and finishing, then went and got an MBA, also went to Dartmouth to do some post-training, and worked in banking for a number of years. And I think when I was in banking, I got a chance to really engage with a racist system that was, it was really hard for me to get my bearings, because I recognized at that time how social networks determine how you grow. Wow. And I learned in that space of how to cope. So the skills that I've learned in New York about how to get along, to go along, or go along to get along, I was able to apply those without taking away from my identity, but knew that if I was going to make it in the business world, I had to build these social networks, because in other words, it was not going to work. And so we did that, worked in banking for about 10 years, and then ended up fortunately going to work, quitting banking, because it really got frustrated in that space, feeling like there was not going to be a way for me to get to reach the higher echelon unless I sold some of my character. And was not going to do that. Felt like I was talented enough. And I got blessed to get hired by this lady named Andrea Harris, who recently passed, who became my mentor. I had a chance to work with her for like 17 years around building minority businesses, from barbershops to sports figures, how do we make sure we get them to access to capital, the marketplace, and having the banking background provided me a lot of that opportunity. And in that space, simultaneously, I found myself engaged in communities, working with nonprofits, working in government, and trying to figure out a way, how do you take the issues of business, nonprofits, and government and intersect them to build a community? And unfortunately, in our world, those are very segregated communities. But I know that in the African American community, we need all three working together so that we can build our community in a way that it can prosper. So how do you get business thinking about building community, nonprofits thinking about it, and government in a way that will charge and accelerate everyone in our community so we can find equity and parity?
Wow. Now, I may be biased, but I do feel like if you have those three that you're trying to get activated, to me, I think business has to go first. It's the most nimble. It's the one that can respond. It's the one that is, and I feel like the other two kind of catch up, probably nonprofit second, and then government seems to be catching up to that. Anyway, those are just my initial thoughts on that, but I'm so thankful for your work, for all of your work. You're incredible humans, and I'm just honored to be on this with you all. Share a little bit about my story, and then we'll jump into the rest. So I'm from Canada originally and grew up in a town called Beaumont, Alberta, very predominantly white town. For most of my friends, some of whom are watching this, I assume I am probably still maybe their only Black friend, right? So even now in this moment, it's really interesting. I'm hearing from a lot of people who are now checking on me. It's like now they're all of a sudden concerned about me as a Black man, and how that's all going. Which I feel the heart, and I love the heart. But the truth is, I am one of few Black friends that they have for a lot of my circle growing up. So a lot of interesting experiences there. But when I came to the U.S. for the first time, I went to Baylor, and we went on this road trip, a group of friends of mine, and we went to Little Rock, Arkansas. And on the way to Little Rock, we stopped to get gas. It was a small bus full of Black people, and we stopped to get gas, and the person at the gas station nonchalantly, very respectfully, said, "We don't serve your kind here. There's another gas station up the road." This is 2009, 10, and but just very casual, not angry, not anything like. It's just a matter of fact that's just not what we do here. And my group nonchalantly gets back on the bus, and okay, yeah, thank you, have a good one, and drives on as if it was normal. And me coming from Canada, that was just not an experience that I was prepared for whatsoever, and rocked my world the depth to which that was accepted. And then started understanding some of the subtler things. That was a pretty overt one, but some of the subtler nuances and some of the subtler ways that racism and white privilege are built into this system, the system is really built upon those ideas. And it's anyway, so it's been a really interesting experience for me. Landed in Durham 2 years ago, and calling this home. This is where I want to be for a long time. We started Nolia Coffee, and just excited to be a part of the fabric of this community in a way. Durham's just, if you love Durham, Durham loves you back. That's one of the things I love most about Durham. If you love Durham, it's like, come on in, baby, we got you. And we really felt that from the community here. So that's a very short version of my experience. I want to ask this question, because this is personally what I am struggling with, and I want to get all three of your opinions on this. So a lot of the rhetoric in the Black community right now, in this moment, is that it is not our job to educate the non-Black counterparts on these issues, that, that's actually placing an extra burden on the Black community to be in the education seat while we are dealing with the grief that's associated with all of the things going on. And yet at the same time, there's this window where for the first time in a long time, people are really, really listening. And for me, on a scale that I've never seen. And I know it goes in these ebbs and flows, that we get really passionate once, you know, another big event happens and we protest, and then it kind of goes back. And but I'm wondering your feedback on that, for the allies that are listening to this, that want to know and genuinely are reaching out, like, what do I do? How do I get involved? And yet feeling this tension between, you know, y'all go figure it out versus I have a window of opportunity and I want to use my voice. That is a real tension, and I want to wrestle with that. I have a question, not an answer here, and I want to wrestle with that. Is there any of you that would want to speak to that first?
I'll go.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
So I know personally, I think that this is an individual question for everyone. I do not think it is anyone's right or place to tell the entire Black community, be quiet, let them figure it out on their own. This is our time to talk. I do not subscribe to that personally. I think it's everyone else's capacity. What capacity do you have? I think I told you this earlier, that we are in this space where there are people that are finally listening. For whatever reason, people have had enough. And personally, I am taking advantage of that and allowing my voice to be fully heard, repeating what I have been saying. But now that you're listening, all right, let's have a conversation. But I'm setting boundaries. I'm asking people to listen first. I'm asking people to educate themselves first and not come to my table empty-handed. That's not what I'm allowing. Because for me personally, again, that is what is tiring, is having people come with their hand out and have done no work at all with understanding what Jim Crow laws are and slavery and redlining and what all of that historical, like all of that, and don't come to my table without understanding that, because then I can't even begin to have the conversation with you. So I'm politely telling people to educate themselves, giving them podcasts and lists of things that have been passed down to me. And if personally, again, if you haven't looked at or listened to a podcast, read a book, please don't come empty-handed. Tune into lives like this and panels like this, then you can hear me freely speak. But I am willing to have a conversation with people who are genuine, not just posting a black square and then going back to posting, you know, a selfie. That's also not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to have a conversation with you either, because I need to protect myself, because I've spent too long in too many different spaces. Like just yesterday, talking to my supervisor and telling him that I don't feel safe in my skin, him going to another Black coworker of mine and saying that he thought that was excessive.
This is yesterday.
This is yesterday.
Right.
This is yesterday, and I spent almost an hour texting with him about my experiences with my 3 brothers and being fearful of them walking out of the house, me stepping into predominantly white rooms and spaces like the operating room where I am in control of the patient's body, and people just undermining me and like, this surgery can't start without me. Like, I don't know where you think this is going to go without me, but like that stuff happens. And me explaining that was just, well, you know, I don't understand this white privilege thing. I grew up in, you know, the favorite, I didn't have it all handed to me. And every single thing that I said was fought. This is how I felt. I wasn't being invalidated, and I was fought. And I'm just not willing to do that anymore. Because I'm tired. I said this on the last panel, like, this is it for a while.
Right. This is the last panel. We get the last word from Aisha Allen for a minute. Thank you. It's an honor. It is. Melanie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not just one-sided. I think you have to, for each individual person, you got to do what's going to be best for you to protect your peace. In this season and other seasons, you got to do what's going to be best for you. If there is, I'm a believer, if there's, for me, where there have been opportunities for me to lift a voice or share information, because there's a lot of really good information that's been compiled and put together, resources. I'm compelled to share that, because I don't want people to also miss out on the opportunity to get some really good, rich information, and where people have taken their time to compile it all, to like organize just in the social media airwaves, like opportunities for further learning, to understand the layers, I'm compelled to share that, especially for me working with students. Like I want, again, I want people to be educated and to be equipped. And so I do what I need to do to protect my peace. And so there are some people I just can't, honestly, I just can't do it today. And just, create boundaries to set that up. But for the opportunities that exist to deepen someone's engagement or to share the education, I want people to be equipped and understand. Also, to understand that this thing, just where we are right now, we need to create movements that are sustainable. And so when things shift or change, like we need to continue to educate. Educate ourselves. People need to continue the education beyond just this, like today or tomorrow or the next day. Like this has got to be an ongoing commitment to education. And so it's my hopes that as information is being shared right now, that people understand in order for movements to be sustainable, you got to commit to sustainable, like that continued lifelong learning related to all things related to anti-racism, systematic oppression, all those things. I think, especially for my work with students, what I've seen in the class that I've been able to be a part of, you have a lot of students that arrive in that class and they're just like, they become extremely frustrated and mad because they're like, why didn't anybody teach me this? Because I feel like sometimes our education systems have failed our students by not providing the some information that would be extremely needed and valuable to help them understand the greater context of the world and ways in which people exist in different spaces. And so for experiences like that, I pour my whole heart and self into that experience because I see the opportunity where students engage in that space differently. And then what the value add is to see them really have a fire for creating change for all students in that class afterwards. And so I think it depends on the person. I think wherever those opportunities present itself for you to kind of dig into that engagement and those conversations, then go for it. But wherever you need to protect your peace and set those boundaries, as stated before, you definitely need to do that as well.
Wow. I love the piece that you said about the ongoing education and the ongoing struggle, the ongoing movement. And that was actually a challenge that I issued yesterday to our community at Nolia Coffee. And I was a little nervous to do it, right? Because we were launching this collaborative candle, or relaunching this collaborative candle with another Black-owned business here in town. And right now, supporting Black business is very popular, right? It's like, oh yeah, like people, which is great, right? Do it. But before releasing this candle, I released this video that said, look, thanks for the support, buy the candle and all that type of stuff. But before you do, I want you to set your calendar for July 5th, which is a month from, yesterday, and put support Black business on July 5th when it's not popular on social media, when it's not the cool and hip thing to do. And do it not because of guilt or whatever, but do it because Black businesses are equals at the table, and because we're a business, and because we're people, and all of these things. Anyway, the response has been overwhelmingly positive and encouraging to hear that. But I think it has to be intentional, is my point. I think there has to be an intentionality, if it's not already a part of your practice, to be thinking about actively, okay, who's not at the table? How do I support my city in really practical ways? How do I support Black and other types of businesses that are that need support in my city on an active, ongoing basis? I think this moment can be a catalyst for people to actually start thinking that way, but there has to be some sort of intentionality about it. It's not going to happen by accident, because it's too easy. It's like you stretch and you kind of go back to close to where you were before. And that's not where I want people to end up. So, Farad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's an old African proverb that said, don't think that there's no crocodiles in the water just because the water is calm.
Mm.
And I think there's so many crocodiles in our communities that had to keep things calm because we understood in this culture in our community that we focus on comfort and convenience and, contentment. And that's the majority of our culture in our society, right? We want to make more things easier. So when there's chaos and catastrophe, then we have to start now deal with the raw reality of racism.
Mm.
And that raw reality allows people to go towards where it's a fear. I mean, right? You've just messed up the fear factor. You've messed up the economy, healthcare. And I do believe there's some divine intervention that created this calmness in our community that have to deal with this situation, because the calmness was created by some other force that allows us to stop, to deal with what we saw. The killing of George is not uncommon in our community. Right? It's been highlighted, but it's not uncommon. And so my concern is that we have as many liberal-minded, progressive people who have focused so much on social justice. And I've said this before when I was running for mayor. I was like, social justice without economic justice is not justice. And that conversation needs to be had because we want to talk around taking care of you on housing, taking care of you, paying you $10, $12 an hour, taking care of you by giving you Medicaid or Medicare or minimizing your health care. In my mind, that's not humane. If you really want to build a community, we need to have all hands on deck. Stop being a spectator. I remind people that charity and philanthropy is not justice. So keep your tithing offerings if you're not willing to engage towards a long-term outcome, because I believe I am a product of, I know a George Floyd. Like, I come from that. I tell people, I grew up in Brooklyn, right? So I know what poverty looks like, and I've seen it. Because people see me in a Brooks Brothers suit, I told them I was once a broke brother.
From broke brother to Brooks Brothers.
Right? Except the way you perceive me is different. So I've been accosted by cops before. When I say all this is just to say, like, I'm willing to engage the conversation when people really want to put a real outcome base on it. And I'm saying from the business community, we as entrepreneurs have goals and visions and action plans. And I like to see that be cured in this space, because just to listen to me is a transaction. And I'm not really into transactions. I want a relationship, right? And the relationship allows for us to build a community. And we are all a part of a family. And I think we need to understand this family should not be bifurcated or segregated or trifurcated because of our color, or the people we want to love, or our wealth position. We need to recognize that we need to act like entrepreneurs in this space and bring forward the entrepreneurial mindset to correcting this and to push back on social justice issues of wanting to take care of you. I'm a firm believer that's what kept us down, and that's what's keeping us down, because we have progressive leaders that want to just come up with another program for us.
Right, because that feels good, it looks good.
And there's no program to solve this kind of institutional racism. And I always tell people, like, racism is it promotes destabilization. And you can be a part of the program and not be racist. And that's also something that people have to deal with that they don't understand. It's like, I ain't calling you racist. I'm saying that you're supporting this system that adversely affects or destabilizes my economy, my healthcare, and my community.
Right. Well, and yeah, it's not, it's the water we swim in, right? So whether you are or not, it's the water we swim in, it's the climate that we're in. That's fascinating. Wow.
I want to say a point to what you just said, and for listeners to realize that we aren't necessarily calling you a racist. We are drawing a parallel to the fact that you have benefited and still continue to support these systems that are in place to oppress us. That doesn't necessarily make you a racist. I mean, depending on how far you want to go, but if you know that these systems are now racist and you're still supporting them, Now, I don't know if I can't call you a racist, to be honest.
That's fascinating. Melanie, what's your comment on this? I think this is good. Specifically on the economic side and the systematic piece here.
I think it's a huge piece that I just don't know that it gets talked about as much as it needs to. And I think it's a real conversation that we need to have because in order, it's a part of the sustainable change that needs to happen. And I think if we're not, me personally, I just don't know that the conversation is happening as much as it needs to. But I'm hoping that there's some attention brought onto it, and we just need to have some more conversations, not just conversations, some like progressive movement and the economic part of things to contribute to change. It's not one-sided. Like there's all these different things that are connected to the change that needs to happen, and it's not an overnight fix either. And so beyond just the conversation, like there needs to be some real action to follow. But I feel like it needs to be brought to light a lot.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So we've passed the halfway point, but again, for the new listeners, the format of this, and this was based on Aisha and I's conversation this morning before the event, just thinking through the format, is that what needs to be happening is that we need to be listening first, and then taking action, especially to the Black community right now. And so we've actually formatted the event this way, with taking no questions from the audience at the beginning, to listen to really incredible members of the Black community who are on the panel here with me today. So that said, now we do want to open it up to questions as we continue the discussion. If you could put them in the Facebook Live. The event was only scheduled to go till 1 o'clock. I'm assuming we're going to end up going over that right now, but just, feel free if you need to hop off. I'll make a couple comments at 1 o'clock and continue. This will be recorded as well for you to share on your networks. So please, questions. I know that we have one from in-house here, Dave Gold. How do I get back to the Zoom? Here we go. Oops, let's unmute. You're gonna have to press unmute on your end, Dave, I think. Oh, can't hear you.
It's still not?
There we go, gotcha.
I was gonna say, Justin gets such a thrill out of muting and unmuting.
Oh, it's so much power, it feels so good.
I just wanted to respond to something you said, Aisha, and that is that it's like when you don't know what you don't know, right? That's what we're all here. And there's something about, and there's almost like you don't get a pass, but there's a certain, you kind of grade it on the curve. But now it's like, we know. It's like the clock has started to run. And I just want to that's just my comment. I can feel from many things, but especially from this moment with you, that the clock's running, and it's what's mine to do is different than it was when I didn't know what I didn't know. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know anymore. Like, oh, I didn't know. Literally that phrase is ingrained in my, oh, I didn't know you'd feel this way. Now you know.
Right.
And I think the point about the clock running is important. I think, you want to look at it from like, karma starts accumulating or whatever. There's something that happens when you know that it's a different ballgame. The universe has changed, and people can't pretend that they don't know what they know. Clock's running.
Yeah, it's an interesting climate. And what's so interesting about this moment for me, where it is at the forefront, again, bigger than I've ever seen, a bigger conversation than I've ever seen happening on a global scale, is that none of these conversations are new. Not for any of the people on this panel, right? Like, none of this is new. And to give historical context to this moment, that is so vital to know that it might be new for you, or it might be hitting you now in a way that you can't avoid. But none of this is new. I remember I had a conversation, and this is before this big deal right now, and just talking about what I would have done, right, in the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and all of these things going on, as well. If I was there, right? I would have, and I would have hi, and this is what I would have, this is what I would have done in that moment. But my comment to that was, what are you doing now? Because whatever you're doing now is exactly what you would have done then. So if you're sitting on your ass now, you'd be sitting on your ass then. If you made one social media comment now, you might make, I don't know what the equivalent, you might put it on a newspaper or something then, right? Like whatever the equivalent is of your action now, because the justice issues haven't changed. The justice issue has not changed. And so what are you doing now? Because that's what you would have done then. Exactly that.
You know, Justin, I want to say that it's so interesting is, you know, working as an entrepreneur, and my wife's also an entrepreneur. She has her own company, and I'm so proud of her, is that, you know, we look at things from a standpoint of how do we change the way we think and behave to be true entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, mindset shift.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift. The Nobel laureate Beckett, I can't remember his first name, he said, you know, never tried, never failed. If so, try harder or try again. And in business, we have to understand that incremental change no longer works, right? So people keep trying to do this stuff incrementally, and the incremental change doesn't create. We need to move at the same speed of times that we're living in to keep up. So when we start talking about equity, this kind of this silence and the sentimentality, I appreciate it. I really do. But at some point, we need to get to awareness and action. And that's the place where the demonstration of showing people that Black Lives Matter, because you're saying that we're going to make sure we help to build your economy so that you don't have to be the people that are most susceptible to dying from COVID, right, or most acceptable from having your kids in places where there's lead, or more accessible when you have to fix housing because you've got us staged up in housing. These problems are not new problems. They just don't have the solutions. And the one thing that I love about entrepreneurs that we talked about this is that as entrepreneurs, we don't look at like, let's renovate or let's renew or revitalize. As entrepreneurs, we're talking about let's reimagine.
Yep, let's
reimagine equity. Yeah. Let's reimagine equality. Let's reimagine prosperity together. Because the truth of the matter, when I was a banker, if you were very rich, you couldn't spend your money anyway. The truth, because you have so much, you can't even spend it. So you're building for generations for the future. So if there's a way to share your wealth to build your community today for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren to have a better experience tomorrow, why wouldn't you invest in it? So I'm saying we need to use the entrepreneurial mindset of helping people to see that as we reimagine this prosperity, this shared prosperity, not in language, but in plans and action, then I think we become sincere and we really appreciate it, because then there's some self-examination and self-interrogation.
Right.
When you start doing that kind of things, you start really moving the ball, because when you start interrogating yourself, you go, oh my God, I got to fix some things.
Yes. And to your point about the sentimental notes that are coming out, there was a post I saw recently that really resonated with me, and is, I know I will not be liking or, whatever, putting a check mark on your Black Lives Matter post until after I've seen a picture of your executive leadership team. So if a corporation, this is, a corporation's putting this, hey, we're in this with you. Okay. How many people of color are on your board? How many people of color are high up in your organization? Or, and just this self-interrogation, knowing that it starts. I had a conversation again, another big-hearted, beautiful ally who's like, no, these companies they've been thinking about diversity and they've been doing all this. So one of the questions was, for my clients, how do they talk to their Black employees in this moment, right? And my answer was, well, if they haven't broken bread with them already and had a conversation about their experience as a Black person in this company, or their experience as a Black person in society, or anything like that, now's not the moment. You just missed it. You missed it. And now is the moment, if you're going to use the moment. This is just my piece of advice if I was talking to a corporate leader, is if you missed that moment and you haven't talked about this until this time, go to your Black employees and say, hey man, woman, everyone, I missed it. period, right? I am so sorry that this is the first time we're talking about this. And leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you missed the moment. That's what it is. So anyway, just a fascinating time. I know we have a couple questions trickling in on the Facebook feed here. One from Ben Johnson Crace. Oh, love you, man. Ben Johnson Crace, beautiful human. And his question is, I'm wondering, as you think through your story, what ally/accomplice actions have been most impactful to you? And so this is coming from someone who I know is an ally and seeking to be an even better ally. So what are your thoughts on ally actions that actually have been helpful, not just in this moment, but before, people using their platform, using their voice to amplify? Go ahead, sorry.
I want to honestly say that up until this morning at 8 a.m., and I'll tell you what action this was, up until now, I have never had an ally do something actionable for me, to be honest. I have been the person that spoke up when we're all upset about something and actually sit in the break room and speak up, and then there'd be crickets. It's like, wait, we just had a conversation about this. Or people knowing what I'm going on, they're like, man, that was really racist and discriminatory, and give me a pat on the shoulder. That's what it was.
Like closet allyship.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so for those who don't know, I've been very active and open on social media about what happened to me at Duke University, and going very pointedly, calling names, being specific, and I'm a former student, and so there's students there now who know that I've been very outright and open about it. And a student, and I won't say her name here, followed up and sent an email, because the school has been very, very quiet. I know that they're seeing my posts. I know that they're seeing me and hearing me, because I can see on Instagram that they're reading my stories and all of this. Followed up and sent an email signed by 21 other of her classmates, and sent it to the faculty asking them why they've been silent and haven't said anything. So that was the first and only time that I felt like there was an ally, and I'm proud to say that today.
Wow. Melanie, Farad?
Yeah, I mean, likewise, for me, I've seen it more in my students, and even before the recent, just this past week. So, but I've seen it more from our students. So it's likewise where holding our university accountable for the response that they gave to our student community, our faculty and staff community. Some of those pieces were led by allies that were students. Also, just beyond just the accountability of a response, they taking a deep dive and the history of our institution, where they are asking big questions about the names of buildings, and putting petitions together regarding, we need to talk about the history behind the names of a building. And so I'm seeing where the allyship is increasing now, but it has been definitely with our students and how they have showed up to hold specifically just our university community accountable, our leadership, our administration accountable, and also asking for continued action beyond just a day. And so that has been a beautiful thing to see. It has been more with my students than other individuals to my colleagues, but nonetheless, I'm extremely proud of those students that have spoken up, and they are using their platforms, or not just social media platforms, calling, picking up the phone to make calls to administration, writing letters, emails, just to make sure that there's some accountability and continued accountability.
Yeah, and there's an ally that is dear to me, Martin Eats at Self Help. He put action into when he learns about issues. We talked about Martin having, executive leaders, Black women and Black men in his leadership team. He focused on how do we do this and started creating a pathway for that and measures it out, because at every board meeting he brings it up. Let's talk about where we've hired people. What's the composition of our people?
Wow.
We did the same thing with his Organization for Supply Diversity, utilization of diverse suppliers to buy product for self-help. It's a big organization, $3 billion CDFI. He started doing that. He hired people to do that. So he resourced it, have 2 or 3 people now doing that job.
Wow.
And then the last thing he's done that's, I think, most powerful is that he was able to attain a good amount of money from the PPP, the payroll protection plan that came out of the Department of Treasury. And one of the first things he did was call Black-led nonprofits to make sure that they had opportunity to get some of this funding.
Wow.
Because we recognize that a lot of the Black nonprofits and businesses didn't have relationships with banks to be put on the fast track. So he kind of did the equity assurance, right? Because people talk about equity, but there's a way to assure that there's equity. And I thought that he probably kept many of our Black nonprofits in business and people employed, because he had the consciousness and awareness to create some actionable steps to make sure that the business reflected that.
Wow. That's powerful, man. Thanks for sharing that. These are some of the stories that need to be told as well. Thank you. Haley, you have a question.
Yeah, I know that Justin, you've shared some pieces on this before and we've had discussions, but I think it's important to share. Can you explain to the audience what white privilege means to you and how deep it runs systemically, and also how to use your privilege to your advantage? And
Yeah. Well, and this is the ally question, and I think Aisha mentioned this early on in the conversation. Just some of the nuances around this, and I hear this a lot in my network. Again, grew up in a very predominantly white town. And so people will say things like, I don't see my privilege, right? I just don't understand it. And they'll spout things like, hey, I grew up in a poor household, or I was the first in my family to go to college and I worked my ass off, and whatever, all these things, and as if it discounts their work. And so I really, this is something I've been passionate about sharing recently, because it's a new understanding for me, is that privilege as a whole exists on a spectrum. Right. And so you have like white, male, straight, able-bodied, wealthy, right? That's kind of like on one side of the spectrum. And, everybody else along that spectrum. But as far as the most privileges or the least barriers to advancement. And so white privilege specifically isn't that you haven't or have been through hard things. It's that specifically whiteness has not been an issue for you, right? So you might have had other barriers or been not privileged in other ways, but specifically the color of your skin has not been the barrier. And that's what white privilege, as far as I'm understanding it, is. And so it's to acknowledge that everyone listening has privileges. It's not whether you have privilege or you don't. I have privilege. So I am a Black man, but I'm a man. And that, we talk about Black women's voices not being at the table. And to me, in society, the Black women that I know probably have the most wisdom to share on any of these topics. And they're disproportionately, at least most people will let a Black man at the table. But now Black women, that's a whole other thing. So it's like, how do I use that privilege, the male privilege, to amplify and to lift up those around me, or any of the other privileges that I have, that I had a university education, or that I mean, there's a ton of different privileges that I have that I get to use. And so that's, to me, the most, thanks for bringing that up. That's the most compelling thought, is not that you have privilege or you don't. It's what privileges do I have? And how do I use my platform, which we're talking about here, which is allyship, right? Like, how do I use my platform, whatever platforms I do have, because I'll be heard in a different way, or whatever that is. just be committed to finding your influence, the areas of influence that you have, and actually using your influence to make a difference. So
I'd like to follow up on that. I think that we should also, I'm sorry, Aisha.
Please. I'm sorry.
I think we should also openly discuss not just the privileges, but the networks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yes.
The networks are just, oh my goodness. I mean, I've worked with people who are of all sorts of spaces. And when I work with people who are maybe in that top category, the networks are incredible. So being able to allow other people inside those networks so they can also advance. I'm not saying I have to have your network, but your network could be helpful for me to advance my space, no matter how good you are. If you really open up your network and say, hey, it also says, it sends a message, because having a sponsor from the privileged people changes the game.
Right. Right. It does. And that's a really practical way to use that. We have a question. We're heading in a bit of a different direction here, but I think really important to discuss before we hop off, which is the question on policing right now. And the question specifically is views on the need for officers to wear body cams or other type of policy-based things versus a defunding approach or lowering funding for the police force as a way of tackling this big systemic issue. Do any of you have thoughts on that, or at least a start on that conversation?
Well, I guess I'll start because I wanted to say something previously, and it kind of ties into this about privilege around skin color. I want people to understand that it is a privilege not to have to step into a room and think about your tone, your skin color, your hair, the last two words that you said, how they were taken, if you were viewed as aggressive, if how you were standing is aggressive, and having those consistent thoughts running through your mind as a consistent anxiety driver. That is, at least for me in the spaces that I operate, anytime that I am speaking to other white people and white colleagues, those are the thoughts that are consistently running through my head. It doesn't stop. When I walk outside of my house, or when my brothers walk outside and go drive a car, we are consistently worried that someone's going to think that they stole my parents' Mercedes-Benz. That is a fear. And when you bring in like police into this and you bring in law enforcement, because that's what they are, I want to draw attention back to the fact that law enforcement and where it started and the root of it was to enforce laws of slavery, laws of segregation, laws against peaceful protesting, especially in the South. And so you had these police that were called on by the people and the governments to go rip people from counters from protesting, go catch slaves and take them back to their slave owners, rip families apart and send them to where they need to go. That is the basis of law enforcement. So when we don't understand why Black people now do not trust law enforcement, those are the reasons why. And so when we talk about defunding the police, it's not, oh, let's do away with the police. I personally think that, like, who are you going to call? You need police. But I think we need to allocate funds, defund, take away, reduce, and put this money toward programs that teach people how to start businesses, specifically Black people, help and assist with their housing, getting them into good housing so that they're not worried about where they're going to sleep, where they're going to eat, so that they can focus and go to school and get an education. So when we're defunding, it's not doing away. I want people to understand that, because we hear this whole like, oh my God, what are you going to do then?
It's anarchy. Yeah.
It's not doing away with the police. We need the police. I value the police. But if we're going to pay for these body cams that you're not going to wear, why are we giving you money? What's the point? You don't need, I forgot the number that they said, but like, we could cure homelessness and hunger with all the money that we give to police. So reduce it. That's just my point on it.
Melanie.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and I very recently come across this, some thought pieces on police brutality bonds, in which money that has been allocated to like lawsuits and pretty much an investment back into police as it relates to police brutality, that, some of that money that the communities are paying for are putting money, like their tax dollars are paying for. So it builds this like there's no accountability when it comes to police brutality. When you have some cities that have these bonds that our communities are investing in through their tax dollars, that are set up to help with the cost of the lawsuits that come along with it and all the things to help that particular police officer that is dealing with a case related to police brutality. And then you have investors that are getting money off of the bonds as well. The system, the layers in the systems. I was like, dang, I was so mad at myself for like not like why don't I know this?
Yeah.
And so I want to dig deeper into what that looks like and where that exists in different communities so that I can educate other people around that. And so when it comes to defunding the police, there are things like that I totally wholeheartedly agree with. I do agree that we where there is a need for police, but I think we need to have some type of accountability that just does not exist right now. It has not existed for a while. And so things like defunding certain things and investing that money back into the communities where they need it, I think is very, very necessary.
Wow. And the issues are, I mean, so deep. I was understanding recently that in most states, you require a longer education to be a hairdresser, which again, beautiful profession. Those are professionals, but you require more time before you get your certificate or diploma or approval to be a hairdresser than you do to be a police officer. And so, I mean, the system, a great starting resource too is the documentary 13th. And that deals more with the incarceration system, but it really, what you were saying, Melanie, just about like following the money trail and understanding what is incentivized and what is not, you can really track a lot. It correlates to most of the issues that we're seeing and even how the prison system is funded and how those dollars, there's an incentive to have people in there, right? And so it's, dig deep into that. The 13th is a really great starting resource for that conversation on that. Farad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting discussions around the laws that the police are following. And those are not done by the police, those are done by lawmakers. So really not look at the symptoms, but the cause. So do we have the right legislators who have the courage to look at minimizing some of the laws and the effects of the laws so that the police can do less enforcement, right? So having that kind of courage to trust this kind of restorative justice for humans. See, we want to look at the lion and cage him, right? But then how about if we look at the lion and look at him as a pet, right? Or something that could be strong for our community.
A protector, a defender,
a defender. I mean, these are the same talents. You know, it's amazing to me how this country has understands with clarity the importance of the athlete. With clarity, from 13, right? From 13 years old, this is going to be a baller. This is going to be a baller. They take care of them. And they work them through the system as if they're, they are blessed. How do we look at maybe incentivizing police in a way for doing good community work, right? Yes, I do think the camera should be on, and if they pull their gun, the camera should automatically go on and things like that. But let's talk around community policing in a way that it builds our community. And so that the community can feel like the police are actually, they can feel like they're advocates. Right. Because they're investing in they're coming to my school, they're helping me with my homework. They're the things that we would really want police to support our community. So this is where I'm saying we need to talk around how do we get our government that may be limited in their vision, along with business, with nonprofits working together to build a community. The fact it's asinine that we work in 3 different silos and we try to pit against each other who's smartest, because our current leadership in politics do not have the competency by themselves. And the business community does not have the competency, none of the nonprofits, but together we really are stronger. So I'm hoping that I would look at, again, this is where I think we should be reimagining a way to make sure that we can get to these goals accomplished and what we would like to see.
Sure. Well, and I think this is a great time to give a shout out to Chief Davis here in Durham. I mean, Durham's not without its issues, for sure. But I know Chief Davis has done a lot of work of trying to go in that direction of community policing, and just even hearing some testimonials already of police who have relationships in the community with people who are just not arresting people because they'll just stop them and say, bro, sis, you know, hey, come on, right? And then, and instead of it going on their record and all these types of things. And so, but it's through relationship that it's actually happening. And anyway, so some beautiful possibilities to reimagine that. I know we do have to wrap up here. This has been a beautiful conversation. We will be rebroadcasting this and putting this out on all networks. Easiest way to get in touch is to follow me on whatever social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, those types of things. If you want to get involved in any other ways, please reach out to me. And specifically, the Enlightrepreneurs, our company who is hosting this, we are a community of like-hearted entrepreneurs who are just about making a difference, coming together. So if you want more information about that, easiest thing is to reach out to me. And yeah, we meet at least weekly and then do responsive events like this based on what needs to be talked about. And we consider this still an entrepreneurship event because this is what's going on. And it's still tied into that. So I want to get one more thought. If there was one thing you could leave people with, or one thing that you wanted to make sure got said or got heard in this moment, because we have a group of people committed to listening as a spiritual practice, as a community practice. What is it? And we'll start with the queens, and we'll go to Farad, Aisha.
So something that just popped into my head that I did want to talk about is when you said bro or sis. I want, and how it pertains to the workplace and us being around minorities and groups.
Yeah.
Well, I'll speak for myself, and I know that others feel this way. It has become very, very challenging to enter workspaces and understand and know the typical rhetoric of, you know, white supremacy and white being right and white being supreme and better. And that's what white supremacy is. That's the thought process of it. And how it has impacted all segments of society. So for me as a Black woman, it's my hair and whether or not I'm wearing it straight or curly, as to not be called nappy. That was something that happened to me all the time. Or the words in the vernacular that I use with certain friends of mine, that would be called ghetto. And so what I have seen and what I've noticed is that things that have been called ghetto or for Black culture are often appropriated in our workplaces and workspaces. And it is very hurtful and harmful to see sometimes. And that is the root and basis of appropriation. So when you hear the word of cultural appropriation, that's really what we're talking about, are the things that we have been told are negative and bad, like having dark skin and like I said, curly hair, and using the term cis, lit, bro. When we hear people saying that in spaces, but then at the same time looking at us and saying that we're aggressive and ghetto and all these things, it doesn't put us in a good space. So I want people to also be mindful of the Black people in their spaces and the words that they're using and the words that they're using to describe the Black people that they work with as well. Not saying they're aggressive or they were fighting or they were mean or they were mad. Really paying attention to the verbiage and things that you're using. Right.
And I know specifically for Black women that I talk to, that aggressive or what's the other word? There's like, she was aggressive, angry. Or she was angry Black woman or whatever. For a white person or even, you know, a Black male, I would say potentially to share something with that much passion, they would be called passionate, right? But a woman shares that same thing and she's aggressive. Yep. She's angry. She is, or, you know, all of these other terms. And yeah, so just being cognizant of the language. And I mean, for me, I would say at least ask, right? If you said something or you're thinking about, it's like, hey, how does that actually land, or what does that look like in the world? Like I want people to ask me that. Dave and I at the Enlightrepreneurs, we have so many of these conversations all the time where, you know, Dave will be like, hey, how about that thing? Or when I said that, how was that received? Or is that something I need to be thinking about? It's just an awareness and paying attention to how things are coming across. Melanie, one
Yeah, I
final
think,
thought from you.
well, I think I just want to encourage people to find their thing. I think there's a lot of, we need to do all the things, and it needs to be a continuous process to figure out ways to take part in some real change. And so I think whether it is educating yourselves continuously, not just for a moment in time, and committing to this lifelong, like a commitment to learning about a lot of the things that have definitely come to light, and in a different way right now, just that continued education. So, or if it's just figuring out what if it's contributing to Black businesses, not just now, but making a commitment to that contribution beyond just a time period. Whatever it is, I think there's so many different things that people can contribute and do in different ways. I think there was another post on social media talking about, like, find your lane, and there's a lane to do this, there's a lane to do this, find yours. And when you do, put your foot on the gas, like don't just stop for a moment. Like, it's a continued process. This sustainable movements it needs to be, like, the work has to continue for everyone. And so I would just encourage people to we just can't do nothing. Like, people cannot just do nothing and be complacent in that, off of the thing of, or reason of, I didn't know what to do. That's not an excuse anymore.
Yeah,
like,
it doesn't cut it.
It doesn't. And so we just need to, I just want to encourage, and also make a call to action. Like, you just need to find what that thing is, and continuous things are, and it doesn't have to just be one. It could be a lot of different things to contribute to some real change. And I know, like, once the fight tactics have shifted, we still need to fight. It shouldn't just be one community fighting. Like, we should all be, fighting for human equity across the board. And so I'm hopeful and encouraging people to find their thing, and find a thing, get connected with others, and organize in groups and in communities to create some sustainable change.
Yes, thank you, Farad.
You know, my dad told me in life, when I was going through a couple of tough times, to remind me that don't just go through things, but grow through them.
Grow through,
It kind of taught me something about life, like I'm going to meet valleys, and to really engage in those valleys. And, that tells me that we just must embrace this opportunity to kind of root out the biases that's inherent in our systems and in our rules and our laws. We just got to be ready to embrace it, that we have to root those things out. And then we must accelerate the process like entrepreneurs, right? We must infuse the right leadership with firsthand understanding of what it's like to thrive in a racist world. We're thrivers. All of us are thrivers in this world that we were blessed to thrive, right? And so understanding that we've thrived in this racist world, and that, Black lives not only matter, but they're critical to our country's promise for enduring and prosperity and a future that is not just built by us, for us, but for everyone. So I tell people, don't just go through this as a transaction, but grow through it so that the prosperity can really be shared, and to push away from programs and language that try to endear us or to sentimentality us when there is no plan behind it. Because that's the worst thing that you can do for a community that's looking for partnership, because it means you're really insincere. And in our culture, when you're an insincere partner, we're liable just to cut you off.
Right, straight up, and should. Well, because to me, the long term, if we don't, this is the problem, is it actually creates more cycles of dependency rather than empowerment or rather than power, right? That yeah, and that's an issue. Dave, you have something? I know Haley had to jump off. What are your thoughts? And I'll give a closing statement here.
I'll be short because I'm listening and I'm thinking, what do you all, what do you panelists actually got your ears pricked towards? You can look for this, you can look for that. Some person's gesture might be inauthentic, some might be from the heart. And I think what it all boils down to is how interested are we? You can give people all this stuff, but if they're not truly interested, it's not going to work. And that's the challenge that I'm putting out to myself and everyone else. To really be, the ways and means will follow the interest. It will follow the love, follow the care. And that's the internal challenge that I'm just putting out to everybody as my own challenge and also as a thanks to all of you.
Yeah, well, and I think until something bothering someone else bothers you just as much, that's it. Is if it doesn't, anyway, another great little meme I saw recently, and it was about the police officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck and Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in his peaceful protest of police brutality. And it was talking about if the first one doesn't bother you or mildly bothers you, so a police officer with George Floyd under his knee, if the first knee leaves you unbothered or mildly bothered, but the second knee, Colin Kaepernick on one knee, has you enraged, right? What bothers you, what stirs you up, that should let you know where your value set is. And my encouragement coming out of this is use what you have. Coming to Melanie's point, that's for me the most compelling thing that keeps coming up. It's the David and Goliath thing. You don't have to go and get new armor. For those who are familiar with the David and Goliath story, you don't have to go and get new armor to go and fight a giant. You use what you have and you use what you know, right? So if you know how to throw stones, which is what David knew how to do as a shepherd, you go and throw rocks and you take out giants that way. You use what you have, you use who you are, and you step up to the plate. And one specific right now call out that's important to me, an area of deep sadness and disappointment, is I am in this moment very disappointed by the church's response. And this is something I grew up in the church. And so I'm just speaking to specifically from that there has been this silence around the issue. And I think a lot of it not malicious. I think it's well-meaning. It's the I didn't knows, right? What we were talking about earlier. Well, I didn't know, or I don't know what to do, or I don't know where to start. And so anyway, I was just feeling this strongly before we closed up, that for anybody listening, and if you can spread this message, I don't know is not an excuse anymore. I don't know what to do is not an excuse anymore. And I think the bottom line is use your influence, right? And this is for everybody listening. Use your influence. And I feel like that area of influence has been drastically underutilized. You have people listening to you, paying attention to what you say or don't say. And I've been really disappointed by the overall response from the church community to issues of of Black justice, economic justice, social justice around this issue. And in this moment, it's just coming to light. So that for me is really important. And even start the conversation with, I don't know how to have this conversation. Like, that is acceptable to me, to start a conversation and say, look, we're starting this conversation that I don't know how to have. And just go there. But that's for all. Anybody else want to share something before we sign off? I know we're way over time, but I thank you all so much for sticking on, for sharing your voices. I have so much respect for all of you who are doing the work, been doing the work from before this moment, long before this moment. And so thanks for rising to this occasion and continuing to do the good work. Anything else you want to share?
Justin, I just want to thank you, because your passions put this whole thing into motion. So a shout out to you as well.
Thanks, Dave. It means a lot, man.
I want to say love.
All right. So much love. Keep fighting, everybody on here. We love you all. Keep it up and be in touch.